Negotiation has been around for thousands of years, and our methods of negotiation have been consistent since the dawn of time. However, the world of negotiation is on the brink of transformation. It's no surprise that negotiation is one of the hottest topics in corporate training. Introducing Keld Jensen and his exceptional team. He mentors the world's elite negotiators. Offering both virtual and in-person sessions. The most awarded negotiation strategy in the world. Seize the opportunity. Reserve your spot with Keld Jensen today.
Hello, good morning, good day, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining this first session, our pre-launch for Negotiation Essential. This is, as I just said, the first session we are doing live, where we're going to talk a little bit about the content of my new book. I'm very excited and very honored and very happy that it is possible to launch a new book. It's been a while. I haven't done a book since 2017, been busy with lots of stuff. There was a small pandemic and other things happening, which obviously should be a great opportunity to write a book, but it didn't. But anyway, I felt the time was right, and it was the opportunity to bring out some new thoughts and some new ideas. So I'm very happy and very thrilled about it. The book is going to launch officially October 24th on the McGraw Hill internationally. It's going to be available from that time as well. We know it's going really well already on pre-orders, so I'm not here to sell you anything. Obviously, I would be happy if you decided to buy my book, especially after our session today. But the first edition will sell out. We know that already. So if you're interested in the book after our session today, or perhaps even now, please go to where you normally buy your book, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you feel likely to purchase your book, and go and pre-order it right there so you can make sure that you're going to get your first copy. Now, ladies and gentlemen, so happy to see everybody. I know that we have people from basically everywhere in the world. We had more than 150 people signing up for this one, which is very impressive since it's just a boring pre-launch meeting. But I will try to do it as exciting as possible and share, obviously, some of the findings that we are sharing with you guys in the book, because we have come up with something that I find is actually new and rewarding information about how we can make negotiation better. But let me just start off first and foremost by taking a step back and telling you a little bit about why is it that we decided, or why was it that I decided to actually write a new book on negotiation? Because you might be thinking, haven't everything been said about negotiation that could be said? There's so many books out, so many books on negotiation out there, and so many of them, by the way, is actually great books. Well, first and foremost, no, everything haven't been said about negotiation. That's the first thing. The second thing I want to say as well is that I sometimes meet people that say, well, I bought this book 6 years ago on negotiation. It was great. I've learned a lot from it. And then I'm asking, but have you purchased and read any other books on negotiation? And they go, no, I haven't. And I can tell you, not only because I'm in the business of selling books as well, I'm not only saying this because of that, but we certainly need to read a range of books, and we want to improve the way we perceive, the way we conduct negotiation. Same thing as our training in negotiation. It's not just enough just doing one training. We have to do several trainings from several different organizations as well. We've had the book out to be pre-read by a lot of very impressive people that I really adore and admire a lot. And one of them is the very famous professor from Harvard, Michael Wheeler. Those of you who are nerd in negotiation like me will know Michael Wheeler. He's very famous within his field. And he was one of the many people I asked to pre-read the scripts before the book came out. And I just loved his endorsement saying it delivers. It can't really be said any shorter and more efficient than what he did right there. Anyway, let's get started. I will spend less of an hour of your time today, and we will have time at the end for a Q&A. So those of you who have questions, please prepare them as I will take you through the presentation today. And I can also tell you that in the chat right now at the top, there's a link because we're going to run some free classes as well that will not be openly advertised. So if you register on that list, you will be invited for those classes that will actually do more training. Today is a little bit more about information, but if you register, you'll get free training and even free chapters from the book as well. So that's your opportunity to register for that. Our session today is going to be recorded as well, since we know obviously there are a lot of people who don't have the opportunity to participate live. And if you want to rewatch anything, obviously, you will be able to. We'll send out the link where you can go and see it on YouTube as well. So for those of you who feel like it, please turn on your camera. It's lovely for me to actually see there's a live audience out there. I can see the list of participants, obviously, but it's always lovely to see faces as well. That's the downside about doing virtual presentations. You don't have a live audience as such. If you don't feel it, if you're sitting in your PJ or wherever you might be sitting, you're absolutely welcome to stay with your camera turned off. So if you feel like it, well, turn your camera on. And when we do have the Q&A, you can either do it by chat at the end or as we go along, or you are very welcome to do it with audio and verbally at the end. Anyway, let's get started. One of the many motivations why I felt like I should do another book on negotiation was the simple fact that I believe, and I will talk you through why, I believe we basically are still negotiating today as we did in 1776. And the book explains in details why. So what I'm basically provokingly claiming is that we haven't really developed. Now, obviously, we can negotiate in a more advanced way today. We have, for instance, online meetings. We can email. We have AI. We have a lot of technology that can support our negotiation process. But if we look inside the engine room, how we negotiate, we haven't really developed. We basically negotiate the same way. And obviously that causes some issues. And it's also a little bit embarrassing because you and I, hopefully, are intelligent individuals. And that means that we should be able to do better. Everything else in 1776 has been developed, psychology, technology, space, what have you. But the art and science of negotiation haven't really made progress. In the academic world, we certainly have made progress, but the implementation of some of the thoughts and ideas are really not out there. So what I'm claiming, and those of you who've been seeing me live knows that this is one of my key areas, is that I'm saying we are wasting an enormous amount of negotiation. And what do I mean by a wasted negotiation? Well, let me explain that very quickly. We basically have two kinds of wasted negotiations. One of them is where the parties don't reach an agreement. Now, not reaching an agreement can actually be fine. I know some negotiators think that the only way to be successful is reaching an agreement with the counterpart. But believe me when I'm saying, sometimes walking away without a deal in any commercial negotiation can actually be successful. Because if not reaching a deal is better than reaching a deal, well, obviously you are successful by not reaching a deal. So when I'm talking about the percentage of 34% of all negotiations breaking down, not reaching a deal, I'm talking about those who would have been more successful reaching a deal. But they don't see that opportunity, they don't see that room. So unfortunately, they don't reach a deal, walk away. And the problem is obviously that the next best alternative is worse than the counterpart where they didn't reach a deal. So that's a problem and what I call a wasted negotiation. But ladies and gentlemen, what is even worse is that we have 58% of all negotiators who are actually not utilizing the value. So that means that we have a tremendous amount of value on the negotiation table that the parties don't see, realize, or capitalize. This is what we call negotiation economics, or as we have reframed it, necroeconomics. And the book are spending quite a lot of pages talking about and using real life examples of how we can utilize that value. So think about it this way. We are really wasting a potential where people are not reaching an agreement with each other, where they should have reached an agreement. And those who actually reach an agreement, there's a tremendous risk that they leave unrealized, uncapitalized value on the table that neither of the sides actually see. Now, that is not that easy, because if it was easy, well, everybody would do it, right? Everybody would reach an agreement, everybody would find that value. So it obviously requires a lot of stuff in order to do that. Now, one of the problems we do have, back to what I said, that we basically negotiate the same way as we did in 1776. One of the problems is that back in 1776, this was a typical approach to negotiations. You see the soldiers in the trenches, they're pointing the rifle towards each other. And this is a typical positional negotiation, zero sum. One side can only win if the counterpart loses. So that means if I want to make an additional $100, you have to pay for it. And if you want to make an additional $100, I have to pay for it. So only one can make progress at the expense of the counterpart. Majority of commercial negotiations are partly or completely negotiated or conducted in this method today as well. So that means majority of commercial negotiations regarding whether you're talking commercial variables or legal variables are conducted in positional zero-sum negotiation. You can only win if the counterpart loses. This is not a way that is really supporting the creations of negotiation economics, negoeconomics, because it doesn't really embrace the idea of transparency, trust, collaboration, and all the items that are there to really, really establish and create value. So the reason for that, obviously, is that a lot of people are not aware of an alternative method. A lot of people are scared and afraid of being more trusting and more transparent. And obviously, we shouldn't become naive. That's not what I'm saying. That would be terrible as well. So if we move from positional into collaborative and just start giving everything away, you would be punished for that as well, because the counterpart in some cases would abuse your openness. So there's some requirements that have to be in place before we can change that approach. For those of you who don't know me, a very brief background. I'm a dad. I have 3 kids, lots of negotiation going on right there. I'm an author of 25 books with negotiation essentials coming out. I'm sitting on several boards. I am an award-winning author, speaker, and negotiation advisor. I'm an associate professor at several universities, one of them being Arizona State University here in the US. Another one is BMI Executive Institute in Belgium and Lithuania. And a third one is Aalborg University in Denmark. And I'm lecturing on their EMBA programs. I'm a former chairman of the Center for Negotiation at Copenhagen Business School. I am writing for Forbes magazine. And I'm also doing a lot of keynote speaking. I'm on the top 100 Thought Leaders Trust Worldwide list. And I have received several awards for the concept of smartnership and negoeconomics. One of them is the Innovation Award. Another one is the Best Negotiation Strategy by the Organization of Public Procurement Officers. And last but not least, I am on the Global Gurus Top 30 list since 2021. Now, of all the books I've written, I've actually been looking back. And the first one I wrote was all the way back in 1998. I reread that book just about a year ago. And my conclusion on that book was that it was terrible. I have to be very honest with you guys. I really didn't like that book. I thought this was, God, it's old school. It's old fashioned. I was not really impressed with my writing back in 1998. So I was out asking a lot of other people how they felt about it when they read that book originally published in 1998. And lots of people actually said, no, we liked it back then. It was a great book. And that made me realize that the book in 1998 I wrote was hopefully not that bad as I felt it was when I read it about a year ago. But what I realized was that negotiation is actually a moving target. It is developing, thank God for that. So the way we negotiated, the advice we were getting in 1998 is not all of them anyway, compatible with 2023. One of the best-selling books ever, Getting to Yes, that came out in the 80s, is still a best-selling book on negotiation. Now, I have to say, it was one of the first and one of the best books on negotiation in the 80s. It really came up with some provoking ideas. It is actually preaching collaboration, and there's a lot of good tools in it. The scary thing is it's still selling really well. And the problem with that is, as I just said, is that what we talked about in the 80s may not necessarily be what we need in 2023. So there's a need to develop and bring out new ideas and look at negotiation in the current market. And one of the new things that just happened within the last 6, 8, 10 months is obviously ChatGPT, Google Bard, and all of the other artificial intelligence tools that is coming out. Something I've been working with the last couple of years, how artificial intelligence is going to collaborate with negotiation. And there's a whole chapter in the book, Negotiation Essentials, actually talking about the ideas and how we should embrace AI, or whether we should or shouldn't embrace AI. I have to be honest and share another thing with you. One of the reasons that I write a book is actually very selfish, because as I've been saying on the screen right now, writing helps me to learn by forcing me to organize my thoughts and ideas in a very clear and concise way and conduct the necessary research. So those of you who are in academia knows that when you have to do research, it's not enough having a gut feeling. You actually need to be able to prove it. You be able to document that stomach sensation you have. And writing helps me either getting confirmed in my gut feeling, or actually have to remove that idea, thinking, okay, that was only me having that idea. In the real world, reality is somewhat very different. So as I just said, one of the reasons I am writing a book is simply just to focus and help myself develop new ideas as well. So when you read the book, hopefully, you'll actually see that it's just obviously my thought, but documented by research that is coming out right there. All right. I have a dedication in the book, and I mean that very sincerely. And what I'm saying in the book is obviously I am very grateful for the amount of people who are supporting the idea, because the idea we have about negotiation, what we call partnership negotiation, is somewhat provoking. When we're running our advisory services and workshop, you will find people who actually get provoked and saying that's not possible in reality. That is crazy. Our counterpart will never accept that. My organization will never accept that. And you know, probably people, I'm no better than anybody else, so I'm doing that myself. We are often bringing up apologies and excuses to ourselves saying, well, you know, that's not possible. We don't have the budget for that. Or, you know, the counterpart at the negotiation table will not understand when we try and propose that. And it's impossible to put a value on the variables. And that long list of excuses we all have. But in order to change the way we perceive negotiation back to 1776, we obviously need to step outside our comfort zone. And we all have that. You know, we all have that comfort zone where we feel that I'm okay in here, and this is the way I've normally been doing things. I sometimes meet people who come to me and say, I don't think you can teach me anything because I have 23 years experience in the world of negotiation. And they may really have been negotiating for 23 years. But what I sometimes find is that they actually don't have 23 years of experience. They have 1 year of experience. They just have copied 23 times. And, you know, that's not 23 years of experience because we really haven't developed. Anyway, back to my dedication here. I am really, really grateful for those people who have been following me for years, who has been supporting the work. And I am really grateful for those people who chooses to pick up this book, because as I said, it is a book that is going to challenge the way we perceive negotiation. And I'm not just saying that because it's cool just to try and negotiate in a different way. Since I'm a commercial negotiator, my focus is creating value for the parties negotiating. So by embracing a new approach, we can actually create bigger value than we did yesterday by working in a very traditional setting of negotiation. Now, let me give you a little bit of data. I was just trying to calculate the other day what kind of time efforts have gone into producing this book. Well, it took actually 6 months to write the book, from the very beginning to when I handed off the script to the publisher. The whole production time on the book altogether is 10 months. So that means that is the total time it takes to produce a book, believe it or not. McGraw Hill is not especially slow. That is just the production time to produce a book. There are 13 chapters in the book altogether, plus bonus stuff. And I'm going to explain to you in details what all the chapters are all about and what the bonus stuff is all about as well. The book is based on 25 years experience. Actually, the concept I'm representing today was originally established in 1976 in Stockholm. I am not from 1976. Well, I am, but I haven't been in business since 1976. I hope you can see that. I joined forces with my former partner, who unfortunately is not among us anymore, in 1998. So this year, September 1st, I actually had 25 years experience in the world of assisting organizations and individuals in government on negotiations. So it's based on 25 plus years of experience and thousands and thousands and thousands, obviously, of commercial negotiations. It's based on study of more than 35,000 negotiators, and we have been looking carefully and register and putting down data on 35,000 negotiators negotiating, both in real life and in laboratory. So it's based, a lot of the study is based on those 35,000 negotiators and their work, their performance, what they did really well and what they didn't do that well as well. The book is divided into 3 different sections. We have one section that is the essentials, and that is basically taking a step back and describing what is negotiation. Why should we focus on negotiation? How have negotiation been viewed previously, historically, and how should we perhaps look at it stepping forward? Then we have the essential applied. That means we're going to talk about, you know, how do we actually utilize it in real life? I have tons of examples in the book because I love using real life example. It First and foremost, it explains it really well. And secondly, it also proves that the theory might work in reality. And last but not least, we are going beyond the essentials. So that means this is what is really on top of everything else. The book is written both for the beginner and the experienced. So that means that both audiences will have a great value reading this book. We have gone through a lot of effort to make sure that we can actually aim for all groups, both the experienced and the more experienced negotiators as well. Now, coming from the world of commercial negotiation, you might be sitting there thinking, well, negotiation is all about commercial negotiation, isn't it? It's all about people sitting in business suits or business skirts and negotiating a big contract. Well, yes, that is negotiation, but everything else is negotiations as well. I'm actually claiming in the book, I've been saying that for years as well, that all of us has at least 8,000 to 10,000 negotiations per year. We're negotiating with our spouse, with our kids, with our boss, with our suppliers, with our clients, with our travel agency, with our bank, our insurance company, and with ourselves as well. So when you start counting every negotiation every day, that's how we end up at 8,000 to 10,000 negotiations per year. So even if you don't feel you're sitting in a commercial negotiation, the majority of the tools in the book is actually compatible for you and something that you can utilize in your world as well. Let's just take a little look into what is in the book. Well, the first section called The Essential is talking about what makes a great negotiator. So we're basically listing, based on 35,000 negotiator, what is it that describes a great negotiator? What is the toolbox? What is the experiences? What is it he or she is doing? Then we're going to talk about the importance of trust in negotiation. We have a term, a coin that we call trust currency. So we can actually capitalize trust. And we know that if we are able to insert trust into a negotiation, you become more profitable and I become more profitable as well. So we have a method, a tool to do that. Then I wrote a chapter called How to Tell If You're Losing a Negotiation and Win It Back. And I actually thought that was very interesting writing. It was very interesting diving into researching. First and foremost, how can we identify we're losing a negotiation, whatever that means? And if we have identified we're about to lose a negotiation, how can we get back on track? So personally, I really like this chapter and very valuable as well. Then we're talking about mastering virtual negotiation. And virtual negotiation is basically what we're doing right here. We have a negotiation right now. I'm sitting here trying to pitch the book, and you're sitting on the other side trying to accept or not accept what I'm saying, deciding whether I want to buy the book or don't want to buy the book. So we are in a form of a negotiation right now. So obviously this chapter is not so much about me pitching a book, but more about how do we conduct negotiation virtually. One of the studies we did with World Commerce and Contracting was that we discovered, and this was at the beginning of the pandemic, was that we discovered that 70% of all negotiations today are partly or 100% virtual already. I was actually very surprised when we reached this number. So that means that 7 out of 10 negotiations already today, might even be higher today, is already completely virtual or partly virtual during the process. So understanding how to conduct negotiation virtually, that is different than meeting face-to-face, is really important. And then we have a chapter on conducting international negotiation. What is funny is, obviously, I'm born and raised in Denmark, but I've lived many years in the US. I'm a dual citizen of both the US and Denmark. And what is funny is, especially Europeans are often telling me that, you know, Americans don't really understand international culture. And I would strongly disagree, because my street where I live, my neighbor is German. The neighbor across the street is from Iran. 2 streets down, we have an Indian family. 4 streets down the road, we have a family from Romania. Further down the street, there's a Korean family, and there you go. So studying international culture, especially when you live in a immigrant society, is very interesting, because every single day you meet international counterparts. Now, why even put a chapter in there, especially since I'm not a cultural expert? I'm an expert in negotiation. Well, it's in there because culture and culture differences is not only a question about that you meet somebody from a different country. It could be that you leave your own office, cross the street, and go into a different building across the street. And there you go, you have a culture clash. So culture clash is not only about meeting somebody that comes from a different country, it could be you're meeting a counterpart coming from a different company. We all have different cultures. So we need to understand and embrace that culture difference. And the reason it's up here is that culture differences is actually one of the major reasons that negotiation fails. We have based that on our studies and clearly identified that that is one of the key things And that was the reason I felt that was important to talk about in the book as well. Then we have this section called Essential Applied. And what we're going to do in there is that we have a self-assessment. I have created several self-assessment where you can test yourself. You can basically see how am I as a negotiator. I'm getting back to that in a few minutes. Then I'm talking about the phases in negotiation. We have pre-negotiation, we have the actual negotiation, and we have post-negotiation. And what is interesting to me is that quite a lot of people feel that negotiation, when the contract is signed, negotiation has ended. And I usually claim that no, they only started right there, because when you deliver, when you have to fulfill what you actually promised each other in the contract, then a lot of new negotiation is going to happen, right? So we have pre-contract negotiation, we have contract negotiation, and we have post-contract negotiation. And post-contract negotiation is often way longer than pre-negotiation or pre-contract and contract negotiation. So we need to understand the phases in pre-negotiation, negotiation, and post-negotiation. And then I'm going to talk about the 5 styles of negotiators, which is the combative, the concession, the collaborative, the compromising, and the stalling negotiator. Then the last section of the book is Beyond the Essentials. And in this one, we become a little bit more advanced, and there is a little bit of mathematics in it. And I'm so sorry to share this with you, especially those who hate mathematics, that talking about commercial negotiation, talking about negotiation economics, negoeconomics, it is a lot about math, because we have to identify the asymmetric value, the difference between your cost and my value, or my cost and your value. So this is the concept of negoeconomics. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes, but it's really important that we understand that part. So in this section, Beyond the Essential, we're going to talk about the principles of negoeconomics. We're going to talk about how to negotiate effectively within this world, how we are using negoeconomics in action, the ongoing journey of negotiation. That means what's going to happen in the future of the world of negotiation. And then there's a negotiation essentials toolkit as well that is very useful, because that's actually kind of a checklist and a toolbox of what you should do to implement and improve your negotiation. So let's dive in on the key topics in the books. And one of them, as I just mentioned, is the 4 critical factors. And what we have clearly identified is there are 4 things that is really essential for you to become more successful, both for you, yourself, and your organization. And that is creating a negotiation strategy. The book is discussing that. What is a negotiation strategy? How should you establish that? Why should you create it? And what is the benefit of having one? And I can't tell you, and the book can't tell you either, what is the right negotiation strategy for you, but it gives you the tool how to create a strategy. Then we're going to talk about trust and what we call trust currency. And that's a term we have coined, not really the 2 words because they existed already, but we put together the word trust and currency. And the reason for that is that we have clearly identified that if you have a high level of trust in any kind of collaboration, your transactional cost will go down and your profit will increase. Did you get that one? So higher trust, lower transactional cost, and higher profit. So it makes sense working on trust. And I'm actually sharing several stories in the book, how we can utilize the concept of trust and how trust is actually a monetized value. So trust is a tool, and not easy, but it is a tool, and the book describes that as well. Then we have what we call role of engagement, rules of the game. And I'm saying something that I know will annoy some of you, and some of you might be very confused about that topic as well. But what I'm saying is that we need to negotiate on how to negotiate before we start negotiating. The book explains why, but very quickly. Imagine that you're getting into a meeting and you believe this meeting is like playing tennis. So you're bringing a racket. Inside the conference room is sitting your counterpart, and he or she believes that negotiating is like playing chess. So your counterpart is sitting with a chessboard, moving the pieces around on the chessboard because they're ready to play chess. And you're sitting there with a racket, right? This is going to be crazy difficult because your counterpart is playing chess and you're playing tennis. That's how a lot of negotiations are going on today, because we don't perceive negotiation the same way. So role of engagement is all about agreeing with the counterpart even before we start negotiating how we should negotiate. It's really, really important, a lot more important than some of you might actually believe right now. So the book is focusing on that as well. And last but not least, we're going to talk about negoeconomics. And negoeconomics is a value, a very important value. And I can explain to you that we know that up to 42%, I repeat, 42% of values in a negotiations are not identified, realized, or capitalized. And the book explains in details how to find that, how to capitalize that, and even how to split that in a negotiation. So that's what we call the 4 critical factors. Besides that, we also talk about gender differences. And the gender differences in my world, I'm a little old school, I look at it as men and women. So we are simply looking at what is the gender differences as negotiators. And let me share a little bit of news for some of you. I'm sure a lot of you knew that already, but we have clearly found that, well, let me ask you a question before I'm actually sharing the news. Who do you think is the better negotiator? And obviously I'm generalizing right now, but do you think it's the man or the woman who is the better negotiator? You're very welcome to share that in the chat. It's a question I often ask. So is it the man or the woman who is the better negotiator? Let me share the news for you. And some of you might just be nodding there. We have one saying, oh, we have Carrie saying women, they're more likely to use feelings. And Mike is saying women. Mike, you are married, obviously. So you're saying women in here. No, you guys, you're absolutely right. Women are, and I'm generalizing, better negotiators than men. Obviously, with exceptions. But what we have learned, and the book is explaining that more in detail, is women are better at negotiation when they're negotiating somebody else's interest. Then they are typically better than men. But, and here comes the key point, when they are negotiating in their own interest, they become worse than men. Isn't that interesting? Now, the book is getting into details how women can actually change that, how they can focus on that. And it's certainly also focusing on the fact that one very important topic is that we have to negotiate as a team typically. And I always really enjoy having mixed teams of men and women. That's basically the best setup we can have. But you can take that away as today, that you can walk away with new knowledge saying, okay, women are better negotiators than men. Having said that, I also have to say I am puzzled quite often when I'm doing keynotes, advisory services, and training classes. I'm wondering, why is 70–80% of the participants typically men? I would love more women to be out there, so I can just send out that message right here. I would like more women in negotiations because women are doing it really well. So please pass on that piece of information to the market as well. As promised, we're going to talk about AI and negotiations. So what is it specifically that we can use? Is it a friend or a foe? On the podcast I'm doing with the president in Commons of World CC and the negotiation room that we have, by the way, free resources. If you go to worldcc.com and look at webinars, you'll see that we have, I think, 21 episodes where we're discussing everything between heaven and earth on the topic of negotiation, one of them being AI and negotiations. So we have a chapter in the book as well, really discussing in details how can you utilize, for instance, a tool like ChatGPT. And a general quick advice I would like to share with you. If you are a well-qualified, well-educated, experienced negotiator, you can, with great benefit, use AI. On the other hand, if you are an untrained, unexperienced negotiator, you are not allowed to use AI at this point because you don't have the critical filter to actually accept and understand what is a good advice from ChatGPT or any other AI and what is a bad advice. So it's really important that we have the foundation and understanding how to negotiate before we just dive in and start using these tools that we have right here. Then we're going to talk about variables in the book. And you might be thinking, why are we talking variables in a book on negotiation? Because variables is the thing that create value, back to necroeconomics. And what is a variable? A variable is everything that is negotiable. So that could be delivery, terms of payment, warranty, installation, education, you have it. We have hundreds and hundreds of variables. And back to necroeconomics, in a variable, if we have delivery time, in a collaborative negotiation that we call smartnership, if we want to create and utilize necroeconomics, I need to know what your delivery cost would be compared to my delivery cost. If my delivery cost is $100 and your delivery cost is $140, well, it doesn't make sense that I force you to be in charge of delivery, right? I should be doing delivery. And the difference between $140 and $100 is $40. That is what we call necroeconomics and have to be shared between us. And you can use this example, then go through all the variables. So in the book, we have specific examples on how to embrace the concept of variables, how you should develop more variables, and what the value is of utilizing variables. The reason I wrote a whole chapter on variables is because working with thousands of organizations throughout the years, I have experienced without any exception, that majority of governments and organizations are negotiating on too few variables. I repeat that, too few variables. There are always more variables than you believe. And typically you are negotiating on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 commercial variables, and that's it. And you've been doing that for years and years and years. and you haven't even been thinking about why don't we negotiate on this one and this one and the other one as well. Let me give you a quick example. I think this example is in the book as well. If you're out buying a car, I think the majority of us try to buy a car, right? How many variables are there buying a car? And I'm not talking about all the accessories, because then we will move into hundreds and hundreds or hundreds of variables. So let's just take all the accessories in one variable. So, you know, additional audio equipment or whatever we have in accessories, that's just one. So we have delivery time, we have warranty, we have price on your old car, we have financing, and we could just list all the variables. I ended up, and I'm probably not even done, I ended up with 64 variables, just to give you an idea about how many variables there might be. So next time you guys are out buying a new car, you can walk in there to the car sales rep and you can pull out this list and say, well, I have a few items we have to discuss today. I'm pretty sure we're going to leave him with a heart attack. But anyway, that's just an example on the importance of variables that we are discussing in the book. Then we have self-assessment in the book, which I think is interesting. They're a little bit pop culture, obviously, because they can't be that long, but they're going to give you a pretty good idea about who you are as a negotiator. So one of them is actually measuring your competence level as a strong or weak traits, what your weak traits or strong traits as a negotiator might be. Another one is a negotiation quiz that simply is testing your knowledge in the world of negotiation. And then we have lots and lots of checklists. I'm a big fan of checklists. And there's a simple reason for that, and that is you and I as human beings, we forget, right? Those of you who are flying frequently, you know, when you're boarding a plane and the doors open to the flight deck, you might be seeing the pilot sitting out there with a checklist, right? And have you ever wondered, I did, have you ever wondered why are they sitting with a checklist? Is it because they have no idea on how to fly this new Airbus 350, so they have to go through that checklist? No, it's not, because the training of a pilot is really serious. So they have been flying that aircraft hundreds of times before. The reason they're using a checklist is because the airline industry knows that if we don't go through a checklist, the pilot may forget to push a button, and that could cause the life or death, rather, of 120 people. Now, in commercial life, real life negotiation, obviously 120 people hopefully will not die if you forget something, but you might be losing 120 million. So using checklist is really essential. So the book is full of checklists as well, what you should remember as a minimum when stepping into a negotiation. Then we'll talk about the 10 essential steps in our negotiation. We have identified 10 phases from us identifying something is a negotiation, and that is actually the most dangerous negotiation we have in life. That is the one where we don't realize we are in a negotiation, all the way to what we call the divorce. So would that mean that we are ending the relationship post-contracting, or would we like to continue our relationship? So we're talking about that in the book as well. Another thing we are discussing in the book is the 5 different negotiation styles. And as I said earlier, we have combative orientated negotiator, we have concession orientated negotiator, we have stalling, we have compromise, and we have collaborative. And the purpose of this chapter in the book is really to give you the tool to identify yourself. So you're able to put a label on yourself saying, oh my God, I'm predominantly combative with a secondary behavior that might be collaboration. Or it could be that I'm a little bit stalling in my behavior, but my secondary behavior might be compromising or whatever. That is the one purpose of this chapter. The second purpose of this chapter is you need to be able to identify your counterpart, because obviously you should negotiate the same way when you are confronting a combative negotiator as if you are sitting across the table from somebody who's concession orientated. So this chapter is really important as well for you to identify how should I deal with a counterpart. Then I got a whole chapter on The Lion King. And I know this is quite an old movie by now, and a theater play as well. If you haven't watched it, please do. And if you choose to buy the book and read the book, you have to watch the movie if you haven't already, because we actually designed each of the characters in the movie with a negotiation behavior described as well. So we put a label on all the characters in the movie, who is combative, who's concession, who's stalling, who's compromising, and who's collaborative. And it's hopefully a very good way of illustrating the different behaviors of the different characters in The Lion King. Right, then we'll talk about necroeconomics. And as I said earlier, we have identified that up to 42% of values are not utilized in a negotiation. This is a promise. I can promise you that if you choose to buy the book, you read the book, and you can't find areas where you can generate necroeconomics, I will personally refund you the price of the book. This is a promise, and it's a recording session right now, so you have it verbally as a verbal guarantee. I can't promise you it's going to be 42%, Perhaps in your industry and your negotiation, it could be 8% or 12% or 16 or 19 or 22. It varies from negotiation to negotiation. But I can promise you there is an unutilized value out there that we call negoeconomics. So the book is really diving into that as well. And then I mentioned that already. We're going to talk about trust currency. And trust currency is a monetized value. So we can monetize trust as well. So we need to focus on trust as a part of this whole negotiation world. And last but not least, international negotiation, international consideration. What is it we should think about the second we meet somebody with a different culture? And by the way, meeting the opposite sex is a different culture. Meeting somebody from a different company is a different culture. Meeting somebody from a different department in your own company is a different culture. So we have a lot of different cultures. And the great news that I'm happy about is that each chapter is ending with an essential takeaway. So it's a very easy checklist. You don't even have to write your own checklist, but every time that you conclude a chapter, you have obviously recorded what's in that chapter. But later on, if you want to go back in the book, you can just look at the essential takeaways that is really emphasizing and focusing what is important in this chapter right here. Now, one thing that I always share with my clients, my students, and my audience is this one. The objective of any negotiation should be a total realized value greater than the sum of its parts. I think that is really important. Think about that when we step into a negotiation. Why are we negotiating? To improve the world, to improve our position. And we're not only doing it for selfish reasons. We should actually step into a negotiation and thinking, how can I help my counterpart become more successful? As you might have recognized, if you don't know me already, I'm in favor of collaborative negotiation. Not always. We have what we call the strategy assessment matrix model that actually helps you identify whether you should use positional negotiation or collaborative negotiation, because there's certainly negotiations where you should negotiate from a zero-sum approach. But in general, if you have long-term relationship, if you believe that you have negoeconomics, you have to negotiate in partnership. And then you have to look at this quote up here just to realize what is really important. We have a tremendous amount of people who have endorsed the book, who read it already. I'm very grateful and very happy. Everybody have been very happy with the book. You know, as an author, it's sometimes quite difficult to evaluate the work yourself. Either you hate it or you like it. You may like it too much or you may hate it too much. But it's very nice having people that you recognize and respect coming out with different comments based on reading the book. And one of them is Chester Elton, the very famous author and coach. He wrote the Carrot Principle and Leading with Gratitude. He said, you need this book. We all do. And again, a very simple quote and a very strong statement within this field as well. Let me just give you a little bit of hardcore data. And this is from our study on the use of AI, in this case, specifically ChatGPT. Because we have been running a number of simulations, and we're still doing it, by the way. I know Mike, who's here today, participating in one of them. Thank you for doing that, Mike. And what we did was we had teams negotiating without the use of ChatGPT, negotiating towards team not using ChatGPT either. Then we had negotiation where one side using ChatGPT, the counterpart didn't, and then we had negotiation where both parties were using ChatGPT. And I'm generalizing, obviously, there were exceptions, but what we notice in general is that if you look at time consumption versus the agreement, so in time consumption compared to the agreement, we saw that when humans were negotiating versus humans, they ran out of time. They had a specific amount of time to conclude a negotiations. In the case where one side were using ChatGPT and the counterpart were not, they managed to reach a deal just within time. And in the negotiation where both sides were using ChatGPT, they managed to conclude a deal way before they ran out of time. So that was one conclusion. We also looked at something else. We looked at level of preparation. So how well prepared were negotiators? And again, we had negotiators who were just negotiating humans versus humans. They were typically not very well prepared. We had negotiators who were using ChatGPT versus humans. They were basically even worse off because typically the one using ChatGPT was not very skilled in using ChatGPT, and that just made the whole thing worse. And then we saw when we had teams where both teams used ChatGPT and skilled in the use of ChatGPT, their preparation level were way higher than everybody else. Value realization, back to negoeconomics, it was very clear that in human versus humans negotiation, it was basically terrible. The amount of negoeconomics realized was very low. ChatGPT versus humans, we increased it. So values were generated at a higher degree. And again, ChatGPT versus ChatGPT was even better. More values, almost all the values were created. And the last one I want to share with you was basically back to collaborative negotiations, all about openness, transparency, and collaboration. Again, what we saw, human versus humans, we could see that actually openness, transparency, and collaborative approach was higher than it was ChatGPT versus human. That actually generated some kind of distrust and more confusion in general. But the highest level of openness, collaboration, and transparency was when both sides were using ChatGPT. So anyway, what I would say in general is that if you ever wanted to become a better negotiator, and I hope you did, all of us do, well, this is the time really. You have the opportunity, not only with this book, but the amount of books out there right now. And if anybody have an interest in which book I would recommend, I'm happy to share that on LinkedIn as well. So just send me an email or put a comment in chat, and I'll be happy to share the list of books that I would recommend in the world of negotiations. So you don't just have to go out there and buy Negotiation Essentials. There are other books as well. But as I started off saying, it's not only a question about buying and reading one book, it's about buying several books and go through them, because everybody has their angle into negotiation. One of the studies that we have included in the book is this one up here. We've been asking 7,000 professionals who are professional negotiators how they view their skills in negotiations. As you can see up here, 13% said, I am a great negotiator. And I actually think that's kind of very interesting, isn't it? So we have 13% who says, I'm a great negotiator. Then we have 41% saying, I'm an okay negotiator, but I can definitely improve. And then we have the last group out here, 42% who actually said, I'm not a competent negotiator. And among those 42%, we actually had quite a lot of people who actually said, I don't really like to negotiate. I have a question for you guys. The question is up here. Could you very quickly just answer this one out of curiosity? Your name will not pop up, so you can just answer it any way you want. But how do you see yourself as a negotiator? Are you a great negotiator, the best ever? You can't improve? Do you think you can improve, or do you actually see yourself as a non-competent negotiator? I'm just curious. We're not going to use it. The book is done, so we can't use the result in the book either. I'm just curious to see how you respond to this one. Majority we see right now is saying, I'm okay, but I can improve. We don't have a great negotiator in the room. I'm sure we do, but people are obviously very modest in here. So majority is I'm okay, but I can improve. I have to wrap up just before we have a little bit of time for Q&A. And another study we did here was very quickly just looking at how often should professionals receive negotiation training. And we were out asking 7,000 professionals again, and 3% said annual training is absolutely unnecessary. We had another group of here, as you can see, 16% said more than twice a year. We had 18% saying at least twice a year. And we have an astonishing 52% of the 7,000 professionals that said at least once a year, you need to receive training in negotiation. So that's actually a remarkable number, because obviously that is not what people are doing. Should any of you have any interest in negotiation, we have our agencies around the world. In Europe, we have Ms. Tine Enneberg and Ms. Krasvidas Jugna, who are covering the Baltics, Denmark, and Germany, Northern Europe. So if you are in Europe right now and you're interested in any kind of training, you can look them up on LinkedIn and send me an email, and I will connect you with these respectable, great negotiation trainers and advisors. They'll be able to help you. Now, if you do have any questions, any comments, please write them in the chat right now. I'm very happy to answer anything I can. If anybody of you would like to do it verbally with your microphone on or camera, you are very welcome to do that as well. Just raise your hand so I can see it, if I can see you out there. And then you are very welcome to bring out a question. Just before we do that, I can tell you that we are running a number of sessions. So if you want to register, for those of you who arrived late, if you want to register for the private classes that are free, just go to the top of the chat. There's a link where you can register, and you will be invited for these private classes. They will not be announced in public on LinkedIn or anywhere else. And you also get some free chapters in there if you register. We're not going to bombard you with spam mail. I hate it myself, so you're not going to get that, but you're only going to get invites for classes if you are interested in that. Anyway, we're doing a number of sessions. The first one we're doing September 14th with a colleague I admire. That is Professor Seth Freeman from New York University. So we're going to do a fireside chat discussion where we're going to sit down and talk about some of the ideas in the book that is happening September 14th. You're going to get an invite on that if you register. Shane Ray Martin, some of you might know him from LinkedIn. He's very active on sharing knowledge on LinkedIn and just a great personality himself. September 27th, him and I are sitting down discussing negotiation essentials. Our communication director from my client, one of my clients who actually won the award, the best negotiating organization in Europe, Tu Knudsen, is going to interview me. He has a background as journalist from international media. On October 26th, one of my colleagues I respect a lot, Professor Joshua Weiss from Harvard, is going to have a discussion with me about the book. And on November 8th, I think Jim is here today as well. Thank you for joining, Jim. Jim is from Google, and he will have a talk with me about the book as well. We have several others that is not being listed here as well. And I want to thank all of you who want to do that. I'm very impressed that people want to spend some time with me. Anyway, any questions right now, ladies and gentlemen? I am very, very happy to answer anything you might have at this point. You can, as I said, either put it in the chat or you can just raise your hand and we can do it live. There must be a lot of questions since we just scratched the surface about the content of the book in this first session, pre-launch session on the book. Oh, I got one here. Carrie says, I can't see the link. Let me just repeat it, what the link is. There we go. I put it at the bottom of the chat right there. There you go. Hopefully you can see it right now. And as I said, it is just if you want to participate in non-public classes, online classes. We'll be running a few classes for about an hour up to the book launch, where we're sharing more in detail about content from the book, and you're also going to get some chapters and other stuff around the book launch as well. We're going to do a live book launch in New York and a live book launch in LA. If you have the chance to be close to any of these areas, obviously in Europe, it's pretty far. I know we have closed book deals with several publishers in Europe, so it will come out in local languages in Europe as well a little bit later. Great question from Mike. Does the book touch on talking people off a ledge? No, Mike, it does not. I'm not a hostage negotiator. So I had a great talk with Mike yesterday because Mike and I best friends on the philosophy of where you're coming from as a negotiator. Mike is a commercial negotiator, a great one. I'm a commercial negotiator. We have both coming with solid background from the world of commercial negotiation. And there's a big difference between being a hostage negotiator and a commercial negotiator. I have the deepest respect, and so do Mike, for hostage negotiators. I mean, they're doing something very noble every single day, saving people, doing a hostage negotiation. But what I'm normally saying is that if there's a hostage situation going on in the neighboring building, don't call me. I would have no idea what to do. I'm not a hostage negotiator. And the same thing goes for hostage negotiation. There's a big difference between hostage negotiation and commercial negotiation. Now, are there tools from hostage negotiation you can use in commercial negotiation? Of course they are. But again, commercial negotiation is a lot about economics. And in hostage negotiation, you're not really talking economics with the individual in there. It's a different ball game. And I'm often saying, why is all the smoke and mirrors in negotiation? Because there's a lot of people out there who are bringing lots of tools on the table. How can we read the liar? How can we manipulate the counterpart? How can we do this and that? And in my world, negotiation is really simple. Let's just be human beings. Let's sit down like you and me and figure out how I can make you wealthier and how you can make me wealthier. So I want to help you become more successful, but not at my expense. And I want you to help me become more successful, but not at your expense. So no, Mike, I'm sorry. The book is not about hostage negotiation whatsoever. Thank you, Mike. Any other questions at this point besides talking people off a ledge? Anything else you wanna share with me right now? Any questions you may have? David is asking a question. Can economics erode margin by increasing transparency? Yes, it can. Great question, David. Thank you for that. If you are working with necroeconomics, there are certain things that have to be in order before you work with necroeconomics. One thing I'm often saying is that if you are a collaborative negotiator, what we call partnership, which is above partnership, and your counterpart is a positional negotiator in zero sum, and you're not aware of that, you're going to lose. So if you are walking into negotiation being very collaborative, very open, very transparent, and your counterpart is giving the illusion that they might be doing that as well, but in reality, they're not. You're going to lose that game. However, having said that, think about it this way. it is better being in a collaborative negotiation and losing the potential of negoeconomics than working in a strict zero sum. So you're still more successful generating negoeconomics, because negoeconomics is free economy created between the two parties. So your assignment as a negotiator is obviously trying to get as much as possible of that value. But even if you're giving all of it away, I can promise you, you're still better off than if you were in zero sum. Those of you who are sitting on the supply side right now, let me ask you a simple question. What would you rather give away to a client? Would you rather give a discount or give away negoeconomics? I hope all of you would be answering, well, I would rather give away negoeconomics. I think you can agree with me. Discount is something that should be that shouldn't be a law, that shouldn't be allowed by law. Because if you give away 5% discount, the counterpart is getting a benefit of 5%, but it will hurt your bottom line by 5%. If you give away negoeconomics of 5%, it will generate a value to the counterpart of 5%, but won't cost you 5%. So negoeconomics is free money. Obviously, we can spend hours and hours just on this topic, but just a quick answer to David on this one. So this is very important to understand that and be aware of that. So yes, there are certain factors that we have to be aware of, but the book is really covering most of that. So great question, David. Really appreciate that here. We have Mike saying, if your freight example, $100 versus $140, how is the $40 used? In many buying organizations, the assumption is the buyer gets the $40. Yes, I would agree with you, Mike. My recommendation is back to role of engagement. Before negotiating, you have to negotiate how to split that potential value you're generating. So if Mike and I are negotiating, I would be sitting down with Mike saying, Mike, you're the supplier, I'm the buyer. And if we are able to generate that value, the difference on all these variables, we have to agree on how to split that potential value we are generating. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, this is a tough negotiation, because some cases I meet people saying, well, we should split that 50-50. And then I'm normally challenging them saying, why 50-50? If you are just splitting something 50-50, you are afraid of confrontation and you're just trying to achieve that middle ground. So I'm not necessarily recommending that. And smartnership, and listen carefully, could actually be that you might get 90% and I get 10%. If I'm happy with the 10%, we are in perfect smartnership and generating negoeconomics. So it's really about negotiating that split even before we end up finding that value. I think we can all agree the second we are generating value in a negotiation and we see that pile of value out there in cash and gold bars and diamonds and jewels and what have we, then suddenly things become difficult, because when we see a lot of value, there's a word in English starts with a G, greed. Everybody starts to get greedy. But if you have actually agreed on the rules of the game before we know there's any value, suddenly negotiation turns into more like a teamwork, because now we're not fighting about the split because that has been agreed already. So think about it really carefully, how you're going to do that split. So excellent question, Mike, because that is an issue that can certainly occur when we are talking about the concept of negoeconomics and smartnership. All right, I don't think there's any other questions right now. We have in the top of the hour, so thank you so much for participating. If you register, I hope you do. For classes, you'll get invites for our classes. You'll get some information. You'll get some free chapters. If you do feel like at this point you want to pre-order the book, you can go to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you usually buy a book, and pre-order it right now. And I just want to say, oh yeah, here's another one from Ralph. Can you please say a word about how the principle of smartnership can be integrated into the broader framework of negoeconomics to foster collaborative value creation while simultaneously addressing potential challenges such as power, imbalance, information, asymmetry? What a wonderful question, Ralph. Unfortunately, that would take a long time because it's such a great question. Could I invite you to do the following? On the session that we have on the September 14th, if you join me right there, I will be happy together with Seth diving into that topic. I will record this topic and remember it because it's a really great question. It's a very important question. And I will promise I'll get back to that on that session we got right there. So anyway, thank you so much for joining today. I appreciate your time. We are recording everything. So if you want to rewatch, and obviously for those who are not here right now that registered, well, you can't hear me right now, but you'll have the opportunity to watch this session as well. So thank you ever so much for participating, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your time. I hope if you choose to buy the book, you're going to like it. So thank you so much for coming and have a great day, evening, wherever you might be in the world. Thank you so much.